Greetings, comrades. Today I'll be talking about the need for the practical application of revolutionary theory in building a mass movement. Over the last year, the world has seen a blossoming of mass movements across the world, as well as uprisings, political destabilization, and some successes for armed revolutionary movements. However, these movements are disparate and often fighting for seemingly unrelated causes. There is, however, of course, a connection between all of them in that they represent a wider conflict against the economic superstructure in its current form of capitalist society the world over. In today's globalized society, the ability to accurately and objectively analyze these movements from a working class perspective is better than ever. And today I'll be arguing that with the practical application of revolutionary theory, both in practice and for analytical purposes, the likelihood of galvanizing these movements into a united front is a real possibility should the political will exist. I was spurred to make this video by comrades in our ranks who have become disillusioned with theorizing, arguing that we should rely only on action and propaganda of the deed and the spontaneity of the mass in building a revolutionary movement. This approach is both dogmatic in its faith in propaganda of the deed and revisionist in its understanding of historic movements, and in practice would surely prove to be damaging and counterproductive towards our cause. The last 20 years since the fall of Soviet communism, a global capitalism has grown unchecked. The fall of the wall being hailed as the end of history, it was expected that sooner or later human society would enter a new age of prosperity and democracy under capitalism, free from the threats of nuclear war and the spread of so-called communism. The period that has followed, however, has been marked by dozens of wars, imperialism, dictatorship, economic crisis, poverty, terrorism, and a sense of insecurity across the world. Without an external threat to hide behind, the contradictions within capitalism, within class-stratified society, and between bourgeois and proletarian classes have been laid bare and are undeniable to all. A luta continua. In many areas across the world where the acuteness of these contradictions is reaching its apex, we see a real class consciousness slowly forming. In its embryonic form, class consciousness in modern society is drawing a line of demarcation between us and them. However, in its undeveloped state and lacking a genuine revolutionary outlook, the working class is disarmed. Many genuine enemies have been identified and many just causes championed. Without a proper understanding of society and the state of capitalism, the working class is vulnerable, its forces in disarray, and its theory susceptible to conspiracy. Observing the mass movements of the 21st century, we see the ineffectiveness of the movements lacking a revolutionary outlook to effect real and lasting change. These movements are rife with petty bourgeois idealism, nationalism, and reformism. We've seen the gains of these movements squandered, their positive aspects made irrelevant, and as a result, the working class has been unable to make a sustained assault against capitalism, oppression, and imperialism. So the movements simply fizzle out or become misdirected and appropriated towards the purposes of the enemy. This is why we need a revolutionary theory and world outlook. This is why we need to fight to elevate class consciousness and solidarity on an international scale. We first require a proper analysis of the present order in society. This involves looking at both the reality of our economic system, the relations between the means of production and the social relations between individuals, the role of the state, police, army, international relations between bourgeois governments, and our own class interests. The objective of this analysis is to identify the systemic contradictions within capitalism, the state, and class society, to create a program for the remaking society in the interest of the working class, to clearly define the roles of different sectors of society and identify which are our friends, enemies, or who could be won over to either side, and finally, the creation of a revolutionary strategy to enact this program. This is the first task of revolutionary theory, to identify the objectives of the revolution. Movements that fail to carry out this first task either amount to very little or become pressure groups, charities, reformist parties, which often become absorbed into the establishment. Without clear principles, objectives, or understanding of the superstructure, they are unable to effectively combat whatever injustices they wish to resolve. The second task of revolutionary theory is the evolution of the class consciousness, the empowerment of the masses, and the initial practical application of theory. This means educating the workers to the nature of the established order and the possibility of overthrowing it, the recruitment and training of cadres, activists, and troops in the cases where armed insurrection is required at an early stage, making alliances with existing organisations with shared goals, with a view to radicalising them and guiding them towards effective means of struggle, agitating class struggle amongst seriously disenfranchised sections of society, and taking initial actions against the state via protests, supporting worker struggles, countering bourgeois propaganda. This is the second task of revolutionary theory. Groups that attempt this task without properly completing the first task will quickly become divided, will waste resources by taking incorrect actions, may fail to win any support, and are vulnerable to becoming subverted and misdirected. The second task must be completed after the first. The third task in revolutionary theory is the analytical development of strategy and practical application. This is one of the most complex tasks and will become at a key stage of development for a mass movement. And whether this task is completed correctly or incorrectly will determine the group's ability to carry out struggle effectively. At this point, the movement will have grown and begun to take its first actions against the state. It will be small, but will begin to draw attention to itself through interaction and propaganda in relation to existing struggles. At this point, a more detailed analysis is required. Which actions were successful? What effects have they had? Are we spreading our message effectively? Are we being clearly understood? What problems have cropped up and how can we solve them? Why did certain actions fail? What caused events that we could not predict and how should we respond? What has changed since we first begun? All these questions and more must be answered conclusively, drawn from evidence collected in the field and from the experience of the masses. A movement, like an army, has limited resources to spend on any actions at a given time. Therefore, it is essential that mistakes are not repeated, that incorrect analysis of situations be challenged and successes be dissected to determine the cause of their success, how this can be repeated, and how it can be expanded upon. All sections of the movement at every level must take part in this analysis. This is known amongst Marxists as criticism and self-criticism, and is essential for maintaining the effectiveness of a movement. In order to produce a full and accurate analysis of the movement and its effectiveness and its relation to wider class struggle, all decisions made at every level must be taken into account. How these decisions affected other sections of the movement, whether their results were positive or negative, whether the decision makers had access to accurate data in order to make an informed decision, and whether that decision or analysis impaired or enhanced the other section's ability to carry out their tasks effectively. All this and much more must be taken into account when completing the third tasks. Groups that successfully complete the third task, groups that fail to successfully complete the third task will repeat the same mistakes over and over, will stagnate, lose relevancy to workers' struggle, and are likely to split into splinter groups who inevitably fall into sectarianism. The fourth task of revolutionary theory is to consolidate the gains of the movement's action through the escalation of practically applied theory. This involves repeating aspects of the second task under new conditions of past successes and failure, developments in society and the movements and class struggle in general, and authoring strategies for action based on the conclusion drawn from the analysis of the third task. Mistakes will continue to be made throughout the revolutionary process, but so long as theory and practice continue to be developed, success consolidated, and mistakes identified and rectified, a movement can continue to grow, to function effectively, to take part in class struggle, and remain relevant to the working class and true to its revolutionary principles. The importance of revolutionary theory can be summed up in the slogan, "Revolutionary theory is the collective memory of the working class." And its success can be noted throughout history, as can its failures, which resulted from a deviation from the Marxist method of analysis and development. To repeat the same mode of action regardless of the existing conditions is dogmatism, and to alter modes of action to the extent that they stray from our revolutionary principles is revisionism. These are the twin evils we must combat in the development and practical application of revolutionary theory. Marxism as a guide to action gives us the tools to develop a revolutionary strategy suited to the particular conditions we face, with both a long-term and a short-term view to guide our struggle towards socialism. This is a subject I'll be expanding on more in the future, I hope you found this interesting and useful to you and continue to meditate on this subject more. As I go through developing my project on the history of radical socialism and my explanation of Marxist theory, um, I'll be bringing up more examples and more Marxist analysis of the need for revolutionary theory and how it's been applied and why movements that haven't applied it have failed. Anyway, thank you for listening. Red salutes, comrades.